Today's episode is with Dave Fulk, a guy with a relentless passion to motivate, inspire, and help others succeed.
85% of people stop somebody online before they ever do business with them. 74% of those people have made a determination of who they're going to do business with based on what they found or didn't find online about them before they ever spoke with them, before they ever had a sales meeting, before they ever walked through the front door. And so that's the crazy part to me is 3/4 of your ability to close a lead is based on what they found out about you online.
We talk about the reason he dropped out of college, the two slap-in-the-face epiphanies that changed his life, how to build and manage brands, and why you must have a personal brand, which I thought was really interesting, and why first impressions are really hard to change. Dave is a maverick in attitude and action, and I hope you love this episode as much as I do. Hey, Dave, welcome to the podcast.
Man, thanks for having me, Mike. Glad to be here.
Yeah, I'm Dave Young, a mutual friend of ours, introduced Dave and I, and it was really weird because Dave, Fulk and Young were on a speakeasy thing with a guy named Steve Sims, who's been on my podcast. I don't remember that episode, but and they got to talking to each other, and it was weird because Dave Young thought of me when he was talking to Dave and said, I really need to get the two of you connected. That doesn't happen to me very often. Like a meetup, it's one where you spent some considerable time together. It just, I don't know. It was very strange. So I was very happy to get that recommendation and to have the chance to meet and now have you on the podcast, Dave. So welcome.
No, it's awesome. I'm thankful to Dave Young for making that connection. And yeah, it's very serendipitous when those things happen, right?
Yeah.
It's the universe at play, I like to say.
Yeah, you said it better than I can. So now I am going to tell all of you a little bit more about Dave so you can get as excited as I am to have this podcast going on with him today. So Dave is a seasoned executive with decades of experience leading successful teams across a wide array of industries. He's the CEO of Reputation Rhino, a partner at Perfectus Capital Management, the CEO at Effectus Consulting, and I love the Latin on both of those, Perfectus and Effectus. That's really cool. He's a husband and a father of 3. And while Dave is at his core many things, he is an operator that knows how to get shit done. He approaches life with a family first mentality. He's a maverick and a business growth expert. It doesn't matter what the job is, Dave will be there to get it done and get it done right. He doesn't let anything stop him from success, and he lays the groundwork to make sure of that. He's great at asking the right questions while being an outside the box thinker and finding effective solutions to the problem. Dave, I start every podcast with the same simple question, and that is, how did it happen for you?
Well, by accident.
Nice. Tell me more.
Yeah, man, I think anybody's life, they have I don't know many people's life who turned out exactly how they thought or planned it was when they were growing up. And I'm no different. I'm in a much different place today than I ever would have expected, as a kid growing up in a very blue collar, Midwest mentality home. I was taught growing up that you go to work, you work hard, you go to school, you get good grades, you get a degree, you go to a job and you work there for 30 years and you're loyal to them and you retire at that same company that you worked at for 30 years with a pension. Right. And the white picket fence dream, right? The American dream. That's what I grew up on. And I tell you, it never sat well with me. And it was lots of experiences through the years where I look back now and they're almost like aha moments to me, where who I really was supposed to be was coming out in my childhood. But yet I didn't know about it. I didn't understand it. And I had nobody with that entrepreneurial mindset to help nurture it. right?
Mm-hmm.
So like I said, it happened by accident.
So help me understand what some of these aha moments might have looked like, Dave.
Yeah. So, growing up in that kind of environment, I had everything that I needed, not necessarily everything that I wanted. So there was a value on a handshake and looking somebody in the eyes and yes, sir, no, sir. And it's, that hard work mentality. And God, I wish our society had some of that today. I think there's the work effort today is just, it seems non-existent anymore to an extent. But things like shoveling driveways, I grew up in the Midwest. We got a lot of snow. And I lived in an older neighborhood. There was 2 kids, period, in this entire neighborhood, me and my best friend, Josh. And then you had to go, a couple neighborhoods over where the kids we went to school with.
Okay.
But all these elderly people didn't want to get out there and shovel the driveway. So I started shoveling my neighbor's driveway. And then they asked the next neighbor, the next neighbor, the next neighbor. And soon I had, 4 or 5 driveways, and I'm out there all day, and I'm at capacity, right? I can do 4 driveways in a day and I'm tired. And, my friend kept saying, oh, why don't you come play? And I'm like, I can't, I'm shoveling driveways.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, oh man, you got all that money. And I'm like, tell you what, you come shovel the next driveway for me. And I'll give you, I think I was getting $10 for a driveway. I'll give you $5. And he's like, I just told him, hey, I'll pay you $5. He's done. He was excited. He shoveled that driveway with intensity for $5. And I went, hey man, I didn't have to do anything. And I still got $5. And so I went to my friends, a couple streets over and said, hey, $5. I got a ton of driveways to shovel. I just went and knocked on every door up and down my street and ended up with like 15, 20 driveways to shovel. And I would have my friends come over and help. And even my dad, I got in over my head, and my dad came and helped, but I didn't realize what
was that when your friends let you down, Dave? Or your dad had to come?
No, I just think I got my eyes, my eyes are bigger than my stomach in that scenario. And I just kept knocking on doorways, getting people. And I overcommitted to how many driveways I could successfully shovel, as a 9-year-old kid. So, I mean, looking back at that now, those were entrepreneurial tendencies coming out, right? Mm-hmm. Had no idea. I didn't think past it. And it was just, bam, I didn't think anything. It wasn't ever a, hey, kudos, good job. Wow, you know what you did type of thing, because that just wasn't the mentality. Right. And then, my setting up a tomato stand, right? I would go, my grandpa lived on a farm. I would go take a box of tomatoes from him. He'd let me have, and then I'd just set up a tomato stand at the end of the driveway and sell them out. So cost of goods was zero.
That's nice.
And it was 100% profit other than my time just sitting there. So things like that, I look back and those were things that I did as a kid, that those were more fun to me at times doing that than playing video games or doing some of the other stuff. So those are kind of some examples. Another example is, I'm a college dropout. And I got to college, and it's finally that time where you really get to think for yourself, and it's free. And I just sat in the classroom, and I remember I had a business class, and I remember that the professor basically was just teaching out of a book. And I'm sitting here going, the only thing different between this guy and me is he's one chapter ahead of me in the book. And it never made sense to me. Like it just 1 + 1 didn't equal 2 in the scenario. Like, how can I truly learn from somebody who's not done it? They're not a practitioner. And so I was a college dropout, and then, went through different phases of my life. But those are examples, I think, as you were talking about, Mike.
Okay. And tell me before I go forward with you, tell me about your parents a little bit, Dave. You sort of described the blue collar mentality. What were they doing? What were your siblings up to? If you have siblings, tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah. So mom generally was a stay-at-home mom with us. So which was awesome. Having a parent to stay home with you and do all the fun summer stuff and activities. And
sure.
They, like I said, I had everything that I needed, not everything that I wanted.
Right.
So being a single income back then, and my dad, worked really hard, and he was always on call. I'll never forget, like when beepers first came out, pagers, when they first came out, and he was always on call. And so I would never forget, I grew to despise the sound of that beeper, because I knew that meant dad had to go away. And I had an older brother, 4 years older, who we didn't grow up with a great relationship. We were very polar opposite in our belief systems, what we like to do. I was very sports, the traditional alpha male, if you will, very outdoorsy, very sports, very outgoing, charismatic, even as a kid, type of person. And my brother was the polar opposite. So we never got along super great. We're great friends now as adults, right? As we've grown up and changed and evolved. But yeah, I had a brother who I didn't get along a whole lot with, and then, one friend in the neighborhood. So I was very independent as a child, in doing a lot of the stuff. And so I found a lot of my joy through team sports, got to play baseball and soccer and stuff like that.
Okay. Our growing up has a lot of sort of similarities to it. My mom was stay at home until we were all in high school, I think. And then she got a job. My dad, was a truck driver, usually on the night shift. He liked like night shift work. So, it was kind of like, didn't see him that much, although he wasn't gone or anything. But the beeper thing reminded me of my own. See, I'm a little older than you, right? So I started my first business in 1992. You were still, I don't know, you might've been in grade school still at that time.
I was in second grade, I believe.
So I had a pager clipped to me for 10 years straight, clipped to my underwear at night, so I wouldn't miss the vibration or anything. I know that sounds weird. It wasn't for weird reasons, Dave, so don't go there. It was all business, man, all business. But after 10 years, I was ready to, well, actually not after a period of time when I was excited by the pager, right? Because every time it paged, that meant someone was going to hire us, to do something, to really regretting having to carry that thing around. So anyway, just an aside. And what you said about the professor was really interesting. So the professor was just, in your mind, was just one chapter ahead in the book of you, because they were teachers, right? They were just teaching I saw something that you did, a video of yours where you were talking about how you consume books now. And it's not exactly, relevant to what you said, but it just made me think, because you have this unique way of consuming books. Yep. Can you share that with everyone?
Yeah, absolutely. So, we learn three ways primarily: seeing, hearing, and doing, right? And different people learn different ways. Some people retain better hearing it. Some people retain better doing it. And some people retain better visually. And so I thought, 3-4 years ago, I used to read books, but it was at a slower pace. And then I went to Audible only, and I listened to more Audible books. And I noticed, like, a few months after I read the book, I'd have to go back and re-listen to it, right? I just didn't have the retention that I was hoping for. And so, I don't know, 3-4 years ago, every book that I got on Audible, I ordered the physical copy as well. And so now every time I go through a book, I've got my book, highlighter, and Audible. And basically, I allow Audible to read the book to me as I follow along in the hard copy. And if there's something really relevant that comes through, I highlight that section or that chapter, or bend the page in the book, right? And things like that. And so I'm hearing the information audibly, I'm seeing the information visibly, and I'm doing something because I'm holding the book. And so what I found is my retention rate and my absorption rate are through the roof when I do that.
So I've never heard anyone say that they do that before, but thinking about it from when I first saw the video and now having you explain it, I think there's a brilliance to it. And I'm going to try it, because with Audible, I get too distracted. So I lose track of what they're saying. Yep. And then I'm like, oh crap, now I got to go back, or I just go, well, I'll catch up, and it's just distracting to me. In a book, I probably don't read as fast as I could if someone were reading it, right? Because I get tired, or I get whatever, and I just, so I love that. I'm going to try it. I think it's a great idea to capture all three things. So thank you for that tip. I'm going to try that. One other thing we have in common, Dave, is I also dropped out of college. after my first semester as a freshman. I'm not sure when you did. And I did it because I thought I wanted to work. I wanted to work and make money. And I felt like being in college was the opposite of what I didn't feel like being there was going to help me make any more money. Like I could get a head start on everybody by just working. So I did that for a semester. I worked at the cemetery, doing burials and cutting the grass and all that stuff. I had worked there in high school. And then they kicked me out at the end of it because the guy running it, he wasn't quite a priest, but I'll just call him a priest for now. I think he conspired with my parents. He's like, dude, you're not going to work here at the cemetery for your whole life. It's just not going to happen. So I ended up going back and I did graduate. So when was it that you dropped out and what'd you do after you did?
Very similar, right? It was my sophomore year. It was just after 2 years. Mm-hmm. I think I had enough almost to graduate with an associate's degree, but didn't. Mm-hmm. And it was very similar. I was living at home still, and I was working part-time for Verizon Wireless. And so what I learned their policies and procedures really well, especially around the comp plan. And I can honestly say this today, Verizon Wireless, the corporate entity, right? The national, international, global brand changed their overall policies because of me. I can unequivocally say that, and I am proof of that. I found out how to quote unquote cheat the system. And so what they had back then is they had a comp plan, your commission structure and how you sold, and they considered anybody full-time 30 hours or more, right? And then you would have a full-time comp structure and you would have a quota, and they considered anybody part-time 29 hours or less. And so for an example, somebody working 30 hours, their comp structure, they had to sell 40 phones or something a month, right? And then once you hit your quota, once you went over your quota, they had a multiplier that went into it. So based on the level of what you went over your comp, your quota, they would multiply your commissions by up to 5x. And so I sat there and I looked at it and I said, if I work 29 hours instead of 30 hours, my quota goes from 40 to 5. Like, it was so disproportionate of what they expected from their part-time employees to what they did their full-time. No, you didn't get the full-time benefits and health insurance. I didn't care. I was 18, 19 years old. Who cares? And so I was working part-time at Verizon, selling as many phones, if not more, than the full-time people. But I was making way more than them because every single one of my paychecks had a 5x multiplier on it.
So you had the same multiplier with such a we had a low quota, but the same multiplier.
I had the same multiplier potential. And so if I sell 10 phones, I'm at a 2x, right? So I was capping out the 5x multiplier, and I was going to the President's Club and these award dinners. And they're like, I had the regional manager sitting down with me, how are you doing this? And they finally figured it out and changed the comp plan. But I was very much, at 18 then, I was making 60, 70 grand a year. As a part-time employee who lived at home, who had no bills. I mean, I had more money than I knew what to do with. Back then, that was all the money in the world that I needed. I was making more money than my dad, living at home with my dad, and so to me, it was like, screw college. So it was very much money motivated for me as well. And then after that, I still had, growing up in that society, I thought I was either going to be a police officer or go to the military. And I didn't go to the military. And so at that point in time, I wanted to become a police officer really bad. And so I kept at Verizon, went through the police academy and became a police officer. And I'll never forget, like I said, I was making $60,000, $70,000 a year working part-time Verizon Wireless. And then I became a cop and my starting salary was $27,500. I basically took a 50% pay cut, and that was to work full-time and then some. And so I enjoyed the job. It was a lot of fun. Driving fast with the woo-woos is great. But I just never, the political side of it just never set well with me. And finally, it was one of those things like I accomplished what I set out to do with my life, right? I said I was going to do this or this, and I did this thing. And it just, I wasn't fulfilled. And so then it was kind of like back to the drawing board. What do I want to do with my life after doing that for a couple of years? Because it didn't have the fulfillment level that I thought it would. And there were some incidents that happened that were just crazy to me, being put on administrative leave because somebody complained, because somebody called 911 in the middle of the night because they said their neighbor's house was getting robbed, and we showed up. What do you do? Somebody calls 911, says somebody's robbed my neighbor's house. They dispatch you to that location because the house is being robbed. That person called, they were moving out. They decided to move out at 1 a.m. in the middle of the night. So it was all legit.
Yeah.
But they called and complained because we came there at 1 o'clock in the morning and stopped what they were doing. And they didn't care that somebody called the police on them. And then you find yourself on administrative leave. I'm like, this makes no sense. Makes no sense. You couldn't pay me to be a cop today, what they go through. It's not even worth it.
Hey, everybody, just a quick pause here to let you know how much I appreciate that you've made time for my podcast. If you're not already a subscriber, please become one today. Leave a review and tell a friend. Now, let's get back to the show. Well, you have the perspective. I only have the perspective of trying to piece together things that you're told portions of, but I agree with you. With all the, it's amazing how brilliant you can be when you have an hour to figure out a tenth of a second situation.
Yeah.
Right? You can.
Those Monday morning quarterbacks, the sideline coaches.
So hard. And you got put on leave for that. They told you to go there, didn't they? Dispatch you there.
Arrived at this location, potential burglary in process. You show up and everything's fine, right? You're on paid leave while they investigate it. But I'm like, I felt like I did something wrong. Yes. And what's crazy is when you go on leave, you're ostracized. Nobody wants to talk to you. It's all of a sudden you're this guy's best friend one day. And then the second you're on leave, whether it's justifiable or not, it's like, don't talk to me, stay away from me. I can't talk to you. You're on leave.
Right.
And it's like,
right.
Man, this is supposed to be a brotherhood where people have your back, and they don't. Right? They do until they don't. And I'm like, made me question: are they really going to have my back when it matters? And so there were a few instances like that just left a real bad taste in my mouth, and especially in the politics side. I worked for a department where the chief was an elected official. So it was very political and stuff like that. And then I can't stand politics. I hate it. Unfortunately, it's an evil that we have to live with, but you won't hear me say great things about one side or the other. I just hate both of them.
I'm with you on that as well, because, there's something weird about a system that when you're running against someone to help to get the votes, you are essentially tearing down that other person as a liar, cheater, manipulator, blah, blah, all of these things. And those are supposed to be the leaders that we're choosing from, right? And the way that they're positioning themselves is just tear each other down, tell us all how horrible the other person is. And I think to myself, is that really what I want the person leading, making a decision on leadership? Is that really what I wanted about, or do I want somebody telling me where they're going to take me? And I know politics doesn't work that way, but it's weird that it doesn't, because it infects all of us with the wrong type of thinking. Like, this is how you get ahead in the world, is tear down the other person instead of build yourself up.
Yeah, and
build the other person.
We live in a society where it's easier to fool somebody than it is to convince them they've been fooled.
Right. Nice.
And that's just an unfortunate society that we live in. We live in a cancel culture where negativity thrives. And I don't think every politician starts off that way. I think most of them probably do start off with a good intent. I agree. But once they realize if they want to make any impacting change, they start selling themselves a little bit at a time to try and get their initiative through. And then it's how do you boil a frog? You put him in a pot of water, you turn it on, and he wakes up dead. And I think slowly over time, all politicians turn into the same side of the cloth, given enough time. I think there's a few that stand out, and those are the ones that are ostracized and polarized in the media.
Yeah. And then, what do they call it now? You get primaried, primaried if you're one of those people. So you had it, you've had enough as a police officer. You you quit and move on? Where do you go?
Yeah. So then I'm like, okay, I was making tons of money when I was living at home, selling, Verizon wireless. So I got back into sales, got into the financial side of things and mortgages, and did really well with that. And this was where I had two epiphanies for me. And this was these, I'll call them slaps, right? Slaps across the face that awokened me. Is I was working for the largest bank in the world, HSBC Corporation, largest bank globally in the world. And I was working for their consumer lending division in North America. And I was just skyrocketing. I got selected. I was in an AMP program, which is the accelerated management program. Out of thousands of employees, they selected like 25 of us nationwide. They were traveling me all over the country to learn from some of the brightest minds of that organization. And like I was on the fast track. And then I'm at the gym one day, early morning, 6 a.m. I get a text message from a buddy. He's like, have you seen this? And he sends me a link. And because they were based out of Europe at that time, they're 5 hours ahead of us, or 6 hours ahead of us at that time. And it's HSBC shuts down North American consumer lending division, lays off 3,800 employees. And I'm like, what? And so I immediately leave the gym, jump in the car, head straight to the office, open the door, walk in, because the office hadn't opened yet, sit down at my computer, and I try and log in. Access denied. Nah, this is a mistake. Do another, access denied. Go to another computer, access denied. And immediately I knew I didn't have a job. And the branch manager shows up, hey, we have a call, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, I already know what this is. And then they fired 3,800 people over a phone call. Get your stuff, get out, you're gone right now. And I'm like, how could I have been doing everything right? I was on the fast track. I was selected as part of this elite group. And then bam, they just shut the whole division down. And it was like, wow. And I just had my first child at this time. And I'm like, it was gut wrenching of what happened. And so then I found a job with it real quick. I wouldn't worry about that. Independently working for a mortgage company. Same thing. Within 6 months, I was branch manager. Almost 1 year to the day when I started, they filed bankruptcy and they went out of business. Oh my God. So within a 12-month time period, I found myself out of a job twice. And this time I had another kid on the way. I had my one kid, I had another kid on the way. And I'm like, what in the crap is going on here? I'm doing everything right. I'm doing everything that's asked of me. I'm rising through the ranks. And yet I have zero control of what's happening to me. I've been thrown out on my ass. I don't know if we can say that on this podcast, but we did. Yep. I'm thrown out on my rear end. And it was those two awakenings, like, I'm never going to be in control of my future if I'm dependent on somebody else to control my life. And that was, I went through a period of, what do I want to be when I grow up? Right. And I didn't know. And I was really going through some soul searching times. So, I enjoyed being a police officer. I went back in this 6 to 12 month time period, went back through, medic school, did that. I graduated as valedictorian of the class, but never did it a day in my life on the job. I just did clinicals because I met a guy during that time and he was starting a company, a credit repair company. I'm like, oh man, I used credit repair a lot when we were in the mortgage business. And so I just jumped in. I was like, hey, let's do this. And I'll never forget, the first few months, we closed out the first year. It was like $20,000, which was nothing. And then the very next year we closed at $1 million. I'm like, man, we just made $1 million business. I'm, 25, 26. And I'm like, holy crap, that was fun. And that was easy. And nobody can fire me. Nobody can tell me what to do. Nobody can throw me out of my ass. I created that with this guy and we did this together. And so we grew that. And I ended up, meeting a lot of people, having the opportunity to leave that and take over a much larger organization. It was a nationwide company, which brought me from Kansas City to Tampa, Florida, where I'm at now. And from there, left that, started an artificial intelligence software platform in the real estate industry, nominated and won the Inman most, most disruptive software technology of the year. And from there, have just started running my consulting business. So you mentioned Effectus and Profectus, yes, right? The Latin etymology of those is, as you said in my intro, I like to get shit done. Well, Effectus, the Latin etymology of that is to affect, right? To affect change. And that's what I do. My core skill set is growth and scale and operations. So I'm a guy that's going to come in and say, okay, what do we need to do to get to point B? And then I'm going to create the plan from point A to point B and get us there. And move on again, right? And I'm a growth and scale specialist. And so that's really what I focused on and working with a lot of companies. And then a few years ago, got into acquiring cash flowing entities, existing businesses that are cash flowing, and now have a portfolio of, I think it's 8 different companies that I'm involved with from a different standpoint. And that's a short but long, not super detailed way of how it happened.
Yeah. So that would be under the prospectus.
Profectus. Yeah. Profectus, the Latin etymology is to profit. Right?
Profectus. Yes. Thank you.
Yeah. But it's to profit, right? So what do we want to do? We want to come in and make those companies profitable.
Okay. So let's explore this a little bit, if you don't mind. So this partner that you started the first mortgage business with, how did you run into this person? Because I'm all about life. Like you and Dave running into each other. How did you run into this person?
Craigslist.
Okay.
I was just sitting there scrolling through, and this thing just stuck out to me. And I was like, there was something that it spoke to me, right? The title, and then the job description, because he was hiring for a salesperson. And I was like, okay. And then I met the guy, and it was like just instant connection. And then once we got in there, he knew right off the bat that I was not just a sales guy, and then, became 50% partner with him.
Okay. So you answered an ad on Craigslist.
Yep.
Yeah. Again,
the universe at play.
Yeah. And then have you stuck with him, or after that first business with him, you've sort of
moved on? That's a whole different, many chapters ago in my life.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, with Profectus, then you are buying these cash flowing companies. I have and my listeners have exposure with, private equity funds, and I've had private equity people on here. I've invested in funds. What's your process like? And because yours seems more hands-on than perhaps private equity might be, but I don't want to make any assumptions.
Yeah, we play well below private equity, right? Okay. We like to work with $2 to $10 million top line revenue companies that are generating at least, around $1 million of EBITDA or more. And depending on the listener, we'll just call it net profit. What's left over after all the bills and expenses are paid. So they're making either 2 to 10 million on the top end. They pay all the bills, they pay all the employees. There's at least $1 million left over at the end of the year. And yeah, we like to specialize in either partnering with them, taking a majority stance and bringing our team and knowledge and expertise in, and working with them, to grow the company, or full acquisition. And what we found is there's so many good owner operated businesses out there that people may have a great product. They may have a great service. They may have a great company. They're just not a great CEO, or they're not a great visionary. And because they were, tenacious within how they wanted to do it and relentless in their goal of having a pager on their underwear while they slept, right? Mentality. Nice. They were able to grow that thing into $1 million, $2 million company, right? I did it in my 20s, like without knowing really what I was doing. Right. And so I felt that we made a lot of mistakes along the way, right? This podcast isn't long enough to talk about all the mistakes that were made and how much money I've lost along the way. But what we found is they grew it to a point where they start to despise the baby that they built, right? Because they hate the freaking payroll. They hate dealing with the taxes. They hate dealing with the books. They hate dealing with this. God, they got to get on another sales call. They don't want to be the sales call guy or whatever it is. And so a lot of the times where we come in and plug those holes for them, reignites their passion in this thing. And, one of our more recent acquisitions and success stories, actually, I've got it up here, Reputation Rhino. I stepped in as the CEO of that. And that's exactly what happened. This guy had done a phenomenal job of building this company for the last decade. He had grown it to a point where he was capped out, like he was at capacity. Okay. He was working 60, 80 hours a week, didn't get to spend much time with his wife or his family, and just had not grown anything past that before. He was an attorney. He was a New York-based attorney for life, and then opened this company up, and a decade later, here he still is. And he had done a fantastic job with it. We took this thing over 18 months ago, I think, or something. The first 6 months, we doubled the company. This year, we will have doubled the company again in revenue and stuff like that. And so it's taking what we knew was possible and then just adding our knowledge, expertise, and team and resources to it and making it happen. Every business is different. There's different challenges that are unique to that business. Sure. But one of the biggest things is I think it was 6 years ago, myself and one of my business partners, Derek in Perfectus, we decided we were going to be remote operators. And if I couldn't manage a business, a multi-million-dollar organization from a laptop anywhere in the world, I wasn't doing it. And Derek was the same way and had a couple brick and mortar successful businesses, sales teams, stuff like that, moved them all remote, 5-6 years ago. And so when COVID hit, that was nothing for us. We had been operating remote forever. It was like, It wasn't even a blip on the radar for us. Actually, we saw business go up for COVID. So COVID, from a business side of things, was actually a blessing in disguise for us. There's a lot of downside to COVID, but from a business perspective, it was good. And so I stepped in and I operated as the CEO of Reputation Rhino, because what we want to see is how long is the runway, right? What problem is the business solving? Is it something that's going to be around? And we looked at this one, and I'll just use this as an example. The need for online reputation management is an ever-growing thing. And COVID made it even more prevalent because more people are going online. And if you want to get into statistics, 85% of people shop somebody online before they ever do business with them. 74% of those people have made a determination of who they're going to do business with based on what they found or didn't find online about them before they ever spoke with them, before they ever had a sales meeting, before they ever walked through the front door. And so that's the crazy part to me is 3/4 of your ability to close a lead is based on what they found out about you online.
So in other words, those 74%, when they call you, they've essentially already determined that they're going to work with you. Is that
pretty much right?
Yeah, okay.
You have to work really.
It's yours to blow. It's yours to blow at that point.
Correct. The conversation used to be all about converting leads. Well, now the conversation should be about actually generating leads. And your ability to generate leads is based on your online reputation. And what I mean by online reputation, listen to this podcast. I know you've got millions of people that listen to this podcast, Mike.
Oh, yeah.
I guarantee every single person has gone to Google at some point in time in their life and searched somebody or something or some company up. I guarantee that probably the vast majority of the percentage of the people listening to this call have done that today. I know I have multiple times today already. And that's exactly what we're doing. What are you going to find on the page one of Google when somebody Googles you? And so that's what we do is we help you control that narrative. We help you become more visible, more influensive, and more authoritative online. So that way people will know, like, and trust you before they ever speak to you, increasing your chances of one, getting the lead, and two, helping close that lead during that time. And we live in a world of influencer this, influencer that, personal brand, and your personal brand is almost synonymous with the business brand anymore. And that's where I've really seen a change is the the consumer will always dictate the market, right? And if you think that that's not true, you're just fooling yourself. And the consumer wants to put a face with the name of a company these days, and they want to feel good about working with an individual, even if it's just the CEO of the company. They're not necessarily working with them. They can feel good about their decision. And on the other side of that, the part we haven't talked about, not just the end consumer, is the employment side of things. The workforce that is the largest workforce at this point in time is millennials. Love them, hate them, whatever you want to do. Guess what? That's your primary workforce today. That's a whole different debate on millennials, but millennials want to have flexible work. They want to work remote. They want to feel like what they do matters, and they want to know how they fit into that. And so they want to know who they're going to work with on a personal level, right? The old cookie cutter corporation jobs, they don't want them. They want to live nomad. They want to rent an RV and they want to drive around the country and stop and work on their laptop and do work for people remotely, right? That's the society that we live in. So these large corporations are having a trouble figuring that out, where corporations, smaller businesses, medium-sized businesses who are focused on their online reputation, people are buying into that a lot more. And so it's been so much easier for me to find a talent. I've been able to steal talent from like large corporations because they want to be part of a culture, right? And they can feel and see our culture based on what we position ourselves online as. So that was a lot to digest.
Yeah,
so I'm going to let you run with it.
You said a lot of stuff there, and I want to get back to one thing that I think we need to dig into a little bit more, and that is the having a business brand and a personal brand. I feel like there are a lot of people who have one or the other. Like many of the people that you see who have an online presence personally, their business is a speaking business or something that's related to that and that alone, where what I think I hear you saying is like Reputation Rhino is it's a real business, right? And all the businesses you own, they're real businesses, meaning that it's not just the one person that, everything is relying on, but you're saying that it's important to have both. And it made me think that when you go to the About Us page on someone's website, there may be information on the owner or the founder or whatever, but that person isn't, when you dig into that person and they don't have an online brand, you're kind of like, it doesn't reinforce, or it doesn't help the business part of the brand. I'm screwing the way I'm putting this together up, but that's what you're saying, right? You got to have
so both, right? You
Both.
need to build a personal brand. You are an individual. Your company does not define who you are, right? I'm involved in multiple companies. I'm the CEO of Rep Rhino.
Yep.
I'm a Rhino every day, all day charge, right? However, Reputation Rhino just doesn't define who I am as an individual. And my personal brand tells the story. And if you go to my website, davefulk.com, you'll see, as you mentioned earlier, there's four elements to who I am: a maverick, a CEO, an investor, and a family man, right? And that is my personal brand. And the more people get to understand me on that level and see that, the conversations are completely different. You and I had a completely different conversation the very first time because Dave introduced us, right? So that was a referral. But then you went to my website and booked a call with me. But you already knew about me as an individual before we ever spoke. So it allowed our first conversation to be much more genuine, much deeper in a way. And you didn't define me as just the CEO of Rep Rhino. I'm talking to this guy. You're talking to this guy, right? And so it's really important to build a personal brand. And the reason being too, from a business side of the brand, is you're right. One of the first things people do is they go to the About Us or the Meet the Team page. They want to see who works there. They want to see real pictures of real people and real smiles and stuff like that. And then what they do is they go, CEO, copy, paste, Google. Oh, this guy's a jerk. Look at this, Trustpilot, Glassdoor. Look at all these terrible reviews. Everybody thinks this guy's a jerk to work for. I don't want to do business there.
Right.
right?
Yeah.
He didn't focus on building his personal brand. Maybe he's just not the easiest boss to work for, but maybe he's done some amazing things in life. Maybe he's done a lot of good. But the problem is the narrative online is he's an a-hole. So guess what? Everybody that Googles that guy is going to think he's an a-hole. And that's what they go into. And, you want to talk about, I'm a facts and data guy. So Cornell University did a study recently, and it talks about how it's really hard to change someone's first impression.
Just a short break here to ask you a question. Have you read my book? It's called Ownership: How Getting Selfish Got Me Unstuck, and it's available on Amazon, Audible, and everywhere else. If you're looking for inspiration that will help you unlock your greatness and potential, order or download your very own copy today.
Whether it's right or wrong, your first impression of somebody is really hard to change. And so they did a study. They had a test group of people. They had two test groups. Test group A sat in a room and just looked at pictures of people. Test group B was the pictures of people. They had some people smile and had some people frown or give an angry face. And they would show those images for 1 second on a screen, and they would go away. And then the test group A had to write down how they felt or what they thought that person would be like in real life, right? A 1 second
From
image.
1 second. Okay.
6 months later, they brought test groups together. They had no idea who each other were, and they brought them together for like a social mingle. And at the end of it, they went back to test group A and basically said, who did you meet and what did you think about them? And what was crazy is they didn't realize that the images that they were shown for 1 second 6 months ago were the same people that they just met, but their opinions didn't change. The people that were smiling, they had good things that say about them as individuals. And the people who were frowning or mad faced 6 months ago, they didn't like them when they met them.
Get out of here.
And that's how crazy, that's how strong your first impression is. And that's why you can't make a second first impression. And so you need to make the most positive online first impression that you can. And so I've talked a lot about Reputation Rhino, but I wanted you to understand the why we really wanted to acquire this business, because we feel that this is a blue ocean. It's an up and coming niche, right? It met our financial parameters, but we also felt we could do something with it and it would be around for a while. We didn't feel like it's going to be, a hot flash in the pan. We didn't feel like it's a crypto thing, right? It's very volatile. Who knows if it's really going to be around in a year or two.
Let me try to get to what Reputation Rhino actually does, so that people are listening or watching really get it. So there's two components to it, as I understand it, and I'm just going to frame it up, and you tell me where I'm completely wrong or halfway right. One is you want to improve how your company is perceived. So that's like one, and then the other is we've got a problem out there. Something bad happened to us at some point. We were sued or, got arrested for drunk driving, whatever. And we want that to be, we want that to be minimized or eliminated. Do I have the two sides correct, or is there more to it?
Yeah. So there's a little more to it, but you got the main core of it, right? Essentially, if I can make it as simple as possible, we help you look your best online. Different people have different starting points. Some people are ghosts. They have nothing about them online. Some people have some of those negative issues, right? So we can help you as a ghost, right? Build your brand, right? So that is one element of people that we're working with, is build your brand, build a positive online reputation for you, make you more visible and more influential online. On the other side of that spectrum is that somebody, the negative side. We will help them remove or suppress as much of the negative information, negative press that's out there about them, allowing them to recreate a better first impression of themselves online than what's currently out there. And we would remove or suppress that as far down into Google as we possibly can. So allowing them to control their image again. And then the third element of that is the ongoing protection, right? So build, protect, repair. And the protect is, once we've got you repaired to a certain element, or once we have you built to a certain element, then we want to protect it, right? It's not good enough where we just want to build it or repair it. We want to protect it long term. And that's where we kind of build a firewall of protection around you, per se, to where it's not displaced as easy, to mitigate the risk of a new hater coming along down the line, or a new bad review, coming down the pipe.
And in general terms, Dave, how does it work? Like particularly the review, the suppress, remove, the protect. Like how do you do that?
Magic. I found a magic.
Nice.
Really good. I watched a lot of Harry Potter. So online reputation management is really a combination of a multitude of different industries or niches. So it is SEO, it is PR, press releases, content management, content optimization, digital media, and legal. Right? It's those five elements combined that make online reputation management. So every client is going to have a combination of those things. So from building websites for them, personal websites, to having the copy written, to having high authority ranking articles placed in Forbes, USA Today, their local news, I'm in Tampa Bay Times, high authoritative pieces placed online that rank really well. And then backlinked and SEO where they show up high in the rankings and they stay there. The legal side of things, sometimes we need to get the legal side of things in for removal or suppression areas.
And so just to be clear, you can't call up Google and say, hey, this is unfair. I really don't want this coming up in the search results. Or is that possible? You have to mitigate it some other way.
Find a phone number where I can call Google. I would love to know what that is.
Yeah.
So first off, I don't think Google even has a phone number. Google, and they bought YouTube, have the worst customers. I hate Google. I hate Google with a passion. They have the worst customer service, period. And they're a terrible organization. There's nothing I can say positive about Google. So yes, we seek to work against and fight an algorithm that seeks to define who you are to others. Okay. So no, you can't just pick up the phone and say, I do this. It doesn't work that way. It is, we are very trained professionals and each skilled in their own craft. And it's understanding, having a strategist who knows how all of these different elements work and know which levers to pull to adjust and move the needle in your online reputation. Okay.
And as much as you might hate their customer service or whatever, the fact of the matter is close to 6 billion searches are happening on their platform.
5.6 billion per day.
Yeah.
26,000 per second.
Yeah.
It's a lot. It's the animal we have to deal with. I don't like it. But it's you have to deal with it.
So you mentioned again, the Maverick thing. I had said that in the intro and then you mentioned it again. What does that mean? What does it mean to be a Maverick?
A Maverick is, a person that kind of for forgiveness, not permission. They get shit done. Mm-hmm. They pave the way, for others, to do things. When I think of Maverick, I think of people like Richard Branson and Elon Musk, right? Those guys are badasses. They have strong convictions and are willing to push through to the finish line, regardless, of conventional wisdom. They're not afraid going against the grain, right? That's a Maverick. And they're definitely not afraid to speak up when something isn't work or something's not right. So right. They are very authentic and loyal, in my opinion. They believe in their own vision and their ideals for the world, and you'll live to regret if you ever cross one.
Okay, I'm glad you threw that in there at the end. I was going to say that they both started rather humbly as well. They didn't come from. Well,
I think that's an element. I think there's a lot of people who aren't necessarily Mavericks that had a very humble beginnings that have achieved a certain amount of success.
Yeah.
If I can break it down to one thing, I'd say Mavericks break through barriers, ignoring the industry norms, and push forward for extraordinary results.
Okay, that's pretty succinct. I like that. And what about this not afraid of anything? That was also something I talked about at the beginning. I feel like everybody's afraid of something.
Everybody's afraid of something, but it's acting in spite of those fears, right? That's courage. You brought up Steve Sims earlier on this podcast. Yeah. Steve is a friend. I love Steve dearly. Steve is the epitome of, if he can do it, I can do it, right? A bricklayer from South London
Yep.
to one of the most celebrated and requested speakers and authors to date. His new book that just dropped calls Go for Stupid. And I'll give you a tidbit of it. It's Steve's special power, superhuman power, is not being afraid to look stupid. And I think because we come back to the society that we live in and the cancel culture, we're crippled by fear doing something or taking action because we are afraid it to be perceived of how others are going to see us. And so for me, I don't care. I put a middle finger up and just do my thing. I don't care what you think of me. You love me, you hate me. I don't fucking care. I have who I need in my tribe. I have my tribe together. I'm married for 16 years. I have 3 amazing kids. I have everything I need in my life to be successful. Your opinion of me doesn't matter. It doesn't. I don't care what you think of me. I'll promise you this. The only hate that you're ever going to get are people that are below where you're at. People that are above where you're at are never going to hate on you. Think about that for a minute. The people who are willing to share their opinions and hate on where you're at in life haven't achieved what you have. The people who have surpassed what you've achieved in life, they're not going to think about you. They're not going to worry about it. So go grab that book, Go for Stupid by Steve Sims, and don't be afraid of looking stupid to other people, because those fears are going to limit your ability to be all that you can in life.
Well, that's a good place to end. I mean, that is a great place to end.
Like this call's over all of a sudden.
Dave, this has been
I have a lot of fun with my last name if you haven't figured that out yet.
Yes, he's fucking awesome. Right. I love it. I love it too. And he's a maverick. Dave, this has been so much fun getting to know you. Thank you so much for being on the show. Thanks for what you're doing, taking these businesses. And like you said, there's so much, it's just very rampant. People start businesses and they're going along and then, things are going okay, but all of a sudden they're not sure why they're doing it anymore. And all of the things, and you mentioned some of them that go into running a successful business are not always things that, founders or entrepreneurs really care about. They take energy away from them rather than giving them energy. And it just, over time, it can just wash all the ambition out of you, even though the business is still there, the idea is still there, and it's still great. And somebody could take it and run with it. It just doesn't happen. So it's great to have people like you and your Perfectus, looking for these companies that you can invest in and bring life back into them and, accomplish what they were capable of accomplishing, but just, the energy and the expertise wasn't there.
Yeah. If you can't tell, I have very low energy. I'm high energy. I can pour that into people, right? I really like to give that back to people. So, Mike, I am grateful and humbled that you asked me to be a guest on this podcast. I am grateful that you asked so many people how it happened, because the plethora of knowledge of just having a conversation with people of how they get there is so inspiring to others. Everybody has a different story. Everybody has a different path.
Right.
And so if you can learn vicariously through successful people on how they do it, what a wonderful podcast. So there's no reason why I wouldn't believe that you don't have multi-millions of listeners because of that reason alone. And thanks again for having me on. And if any of the listeners want to connect with me, want to know more about, what it looks like to partner with a company to help you grow and scale faster, or maybe you're interested in building your brand or repairing your brand, the easiest place is just davefulk.com, DAVEFULK.com. That's my website, and get in touch with me there, and I'll get you wherever you need to go, whether that's talking with me or one of my team members.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for having me today in your world. And reach out to Dave Fulk and experience a maverick.
Awesome, Mike. Thank you.